everybody. Brian Neubert here from goldenblack.com, live once again in my cave at home. It is Friday, May 8th. Disregard the fact totally that I'm wearing the same shirt as I was on Thursday, May 7th. It is definitely Friday, May 8th here and not Thursday, May 7th. This is your goldenblack.com Daily Quarantine Simulcast for today, our last one of the week. This is brought to you by Purdue Federal Credit Union, the Follows Purdue Bookstores. Almost flubbed that there for a second. Purdue Federal Credit Union, Follows Purdue Bookstores, 6th Street Dive Restaurant, First Source Bank, East End Grill, and the Charters Team Remaxability Plus. I only do it every single day, and I almost flubbed it. Want to remind you, as always, if you're looking for a great dinner this weekend and to support our local businesses, please keep in mind our restaurant sponsors, those being the 6th Street Dive Restaurant in Lafayette, the East End Grill downtown, Arnie's in Lafayette, West Lafayette, and all over the state, Bruno's on the Levee on campus, and the Whitaker Inn out in West Lafayette, out in my neck of the woods, out by Harrison High School. If you're accessing this via our YouTube channel, please be sure to subscribe. I don't know why I tell you that every day. It's apparently beneficial. Everyone else on YouTube does it, so please, if you see that subscribe button, go ahead and hit it. We are running a little bit low on topics here these days. Next week I might end up talking about movies, recipes, song lyrics, whatever it might be. But I am doing some legwork here on some stories about men's basketball and kind of the unconventional offseason Purdue's men's basketball program is sort of venturing into here. So I might have done this already. I don't know. It's all run together. I have no idea what I've talked about thus far already. But I figured I would just do this video about Purdue's offseason and what's going on. The majority of Purdue's players are remote right now. I know some players have come and gone to and from campus. I know there's upwards of 100 plus student athletes in and around West Lafayette per athletic director Mike Babinski last week. I know some men's basketball players have been among that group. I know Travion Williams at the moment, I think, is on campus. I'm not sure who else. A lot of these guys are remote, having to kind of figure things out on their own, having to find ways to stay active, find ways to play basketball however they can. This runs counter to what basketball players are. Basketball players play basketball all the time. Aside from guys who've been injured, this is, I'd imagine for some of these guys, this is the longest they've ever gone without playing competitive basketball of some kind. And when I say competitive basketball, I don't mean Big Ten basketball games. I mean just pickup games, full court games, competitive practices, whatever it may be. This is obviously a very different situation for a lot of these guys from a workout perspective, staying in shape, not only staying in shape, but actually trying to improve from a strength and conditioning perspective. Obviously, those who are at home don't have access to the sort of resources they'd have on campus. Those on campus, I'm not sure they have the access to the resources either, because I'm not really sure how that's working at Purdue right now. I know the facilities are technically closed, whether or not one or two people at a time maybe can use things at some point in time here to come. I have no idea. I don't know, but obviously a very unconventional situation, a situation, however, that everyone has to acclimate to all across the country. I think what this is a tremendous test of every team's maturity collectively, because I think obviously these players are used to being around their teams. They're used to having coaches and academic advisors and strength coaches and nutritionists pushing them and harping on them and everything at all times. Now they're accountable directly to themselves, and they have to be trusted. They have to take it upon themselves to make sure they're doing the right things at all times. The more mature players will rise to the top. The more experienced players, I think, will rise to the top. Purdue has a step to make, I think, in some intangible areas from last season to this season, and I think this could be a situation that sort of forces them into that. Players have to take it upon themselves to want to get better, to want to make the most of a really uncommon situation. And I think it will be a good test of their mettle, a good test of their maturity, of whatever else. And it will, but this is the reality for every college basketball program right now. Purdue is going to lose out to some extent on this because more so than other programs, because Purdue did have that trip to Europe scheduled for August. Those games would have been very beneficial to Purdue as it looks to get better, as it looks to phase in some impact newcomers. The two redshirt kids who didn't play last season, this would have been their first real competitive basketball in quite some time, aside from practice. The freshmen coming in Jaden Ivey and Ethan Morton in particular are two guys who can be pretty high impact players for Purdue this season, in my opinion, in a lot of opinions. And I think those games in Europe would have accelerated their acclimation process. Really unfortunate for Purdue to not get that trip. They will postpone it till next year. So Caleb, first, again, you got a free trip to Europe. Congratulations. Thank you, coronavirus. That's where they really lose out. But the real losers in all of this, and I obviously don't mean losers as in losers, like, haha, you're a loser. But the people who are going to be hurt the most by this are the freshmen. Because the freshmen coming in, they all arrive in June. They all get to be part of those practices. And the NCAA allows you now, much more so now than they did years ago, to actually have meaningful, legitimate, full team, real life practices in the summer. And that has become a really important part of getting freshmen acclimated to their programs. And obviously, everyone is dealing with this same issue, but the programs that need their freshmen to help more than some other programs might are the ones that are really going to probably feel that more than anything. And I think even though Purdue has a lot of guys coming back from this past season's team, a lot of guys will be better than they were last year because they're experienced and because the natural progression of time will lead to improvement. Jaden Ivey and Ethan Morton, to me, are two potential really high impact sorts of guys who in a lot of years would come in and be starters from day one. Whether or not the returnees will allow that to happen next season, I don't know. But I think that's the caliber of player Purdue's getting in Jaden Ivey and Ethan Morton. Says nothing too about Zach Edey, the center, who's also coming in as part of that class. There's an opportunity now for a young center to come in and get some minutes. With Matt Harms having departed, Purdue is looking for answers behind Trevion Williams at center. That's Emmanuel Duona, and that is Zach Edey in terms of true centers on the roster. So it's not like it's just Ivey and Ethan Morton. Zach Edey really could use those summer practices now, too, to see what kind of position he can put himself in to potentially help Purdue right away next year. The reasonable presumption there was that here's a guy who's played basketball only a couple years. He's a guy you probably bring in and you have time on your side with, see what you got, maybe year 2, year 3. That may not necessarily be the case anymore if it ever was viewed that way internally. It probably wasn't. It's easier for us to look at it like that from the outside than people within programs actually do. But this would have been an important summer for Zach Edey as well. Not to say it can't still be. It's just going to have to be done very differently. There is still hope that the freshmen can come to campus in June. What they can do in June in terms of organized team activities, as it's dubbed, I don't know. The Big Ten obviously has extended its ban on such things. The summer is going to be pretty quiet, most likely, and having them on campus is just part of the equation. The other part of the equation is what they can actually do once they're here. But I think normalcy is pretty much out the window for this offseason. A summer full of traditional full team practices, might not necessarily be reality. The Europe trip is obviously off. There will not be a normal strength and conditioning program from the end of the season to the start of October practice. That's already out the window because the guys who have been in the program this spring and summer thus far have already lost out on that. In terms of the newcomers, who knows what lies ahead for them, but I don't see anything traditional about their experience here either. The thing about springs and summers for basketball teams is, perhaps we make too much of this stuff. It seems like the time when teams build camaraderie, they build chemistry, they establish leadership, things like that, being around each other all the time instead of having a weekly Zoom call. It's obviously not the same thing. That's what Purdue's doing, basically. They're having a weekly call on Zoom, obviously keeping in contact with each other regularly. as you would expect, but that weekly Zoom call seems like kind of the meeting of the minds they have every week to kind of keep them on the same page. That is not the same as being with your guys every day of every week like you would be normally. And something's going to be lost in translation there. And as I said, off seasons are often about camaraderie, chemistry, and establishing leadership, and all of those things are crucially important for Purdue. I think we can all agree that however you define leadership, Purdue was missing a certain something last season. However you define a competitiveness, an edge, so to speak, Purdue was missing a certain something this past season that this team has to establish, grow into, whatever means it needs to get to that. It needs to get to that. And this offseason, obviously that was something that was going to be kind of important. The strength and conditioning part of it, obviously, again, Purdue isn't going to have its normal offseason in the weight room in terms of building strength and stamina and power and whatever else conditioning-wise. I think obviously this applies to one player above all others. Purdue's got to get a great season out of Travion Williams. To have a great season, Travion Williams might have had to have a great offseason. It's not to say he still can't, but I think the ideal scenario would have been for him to be in a traditional spring to fall sort of lifting regimen, not just lifting, but obviously conditioning. Purdue needs him to play, more minutes at a high level than he could his first two seasons. He knows that. Purdue knows that, and that really puts a premium on his conditioning. And whether or not he can still have a traditional offseason in that sense remains to be seen. Otherwise, I don't know if this is a Purdue team that desperately needs to get bigger and stronger across the board. I know people look at like Isaiah Thompson and Eric Hunter as two guys whose bodies suggest that, hey, those guys need to get bigger and stronger. While it could help, I don't know if either's game is predicated on power of any kind. I don't know if I don't know if they really miss out on anything by being, a little bit slight. So I'm not sure it's as big a deal as people think, just kind of looking at them. I think it matters. I think it can help them, but I don't know if it's a desperate, urgent, four-alarm fire type of need for both of them. But otherwise, I think Purdue's in relatively decent shape in that sense. I think the guys coming in are relatively physically mature. Jaden Ivey is that way. I think Ethan Morton's mind is his greatest asset. I don't know if he can certainly get bigger and stronger. I don't know if he's necessarily a guy who's going to ever need to overpower anyone, but I don't know if it's an urgent, desperate, he can't play until he's strong type of thing. Brandon Newman and Mason Gillis, the two kids coming out of redshirt, those guys are grown men. They are fine. They have a year in the program. I don't know if the strength and conditioning aspect of this really matters as much to them as it would a lot of other people. I think Aaron Wheeler is a guy who can always get stronger and more physical, but I think it's more a matter of him playing more physical than actually getting more physical, if that makes any sense. I don't think his body type is ever going to be one that dictates or suggests he's going to be that 225-pound Julius Randle type of guy. He's always going to be a long athlete who gets by with length and athleticism and, the ability to make open shots when they're going in. So I think looking at him physically and saying that kid's got to get much bigger and stronger, I don't know if that's necessarily reality. So what I'm trying to say here is that other than Travion Williams and his conditioning, I don't know if this is a team where you look at Purdue across the board and say these guys have got to be in the weight room all summer and they're really going to lose out because of this unconventional offseason. I don't know if that's reality, but, who knows? All I know is this is going to benefit no one. This is going to hurt everyone, most likely, and it's going to hurt some more than others. Where Purdue falls in that hierarchy, I can only speculate, but I think they really would have benefited from Europe. I think they really would have benefited from Jaden Ivey and Ethan Morton having full team, 5-on-5 practices this summer. Whether they can still do that or not remains to be seen. If Purdue cannot until fall or whenever, I think that is missed improvement time for Purdue and something that could set them back a little bit when practice does start in October, assuming it does. Relative to what they could have been otherwise. So, but once again, like with everything else with this COVID-19 stuff, this is everybody's problem. It is not a problem unique to Purdue. These things will affect some teams more than others. It's just a matter of where Purdue falls on that. The biggest thing is that Purdue's guys are focused and mature enough when they're out on their own to make sure that they're holding themselves accountable without having people necessarily all the time making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing exactly when they're supposed to be doing it. This is a great test of maturity, of focus, of one's desire to improve, etc. So there is value in all of this too. There's value in every experience any of us ever experience in life, and I think this is a very uncommon experience for college basketball players and college football players alike, but one that people I think can also benefit from in terms of the simple having to adjust on the fly to a difficult situation. I am now talking in circles, as I tend to do. So I am going to stick the landing on this, and I've said everything I can possibly say. I will have coverage next week of some kind on our site at goldenblack.com in terms of what a couple of players are doing to kind of stay on top of things, how Purdue's orchestrating its program when a lot of its players are kind of strewn all about, and so on and so forth. So please stay tuned to goldenblack.com next week for that. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. I hope everyone stays safe, and I thank everybody for watching and listening. And once again, this has been your goldenblack.com Daily Quarantine Simulcast for Friday, May 8th. Definitely not Thursday, May 7th, even though I'm wearing the same shirt as I was then. It's been brought to you by Fox Purdue Bookstores, Purdue Federal Credit Union, the 6th Street Dive Restaurant, First Source Bank, East End Grill, and the Charters Team Remaxability Plus. If you want to get a hell of a dinner, please keep in mind the East End Grill, 6th Street Dive, Arnie's, Bruno's, and the Whitaker Inn. And I implore you once again, please do not call Purdue Federal Credit Union looking for dinner because they don't have it. So I'm going to beat that joke into the ground. Nobody beats a joke into the ground like this guy right here. So take care, everybody. Have a great weekend.